Before we begin, imagine this. A mansion standing in the heavy Louisiana heat. A mother and daughter bound by blood, pride, and a secret neither of them could survive. This is the story of how one forbidden love turned a wealthy family into a whispered legend of disappearance, jealousy, and betrayal. And trust me, once you step inside Magnolia Point Plantation, you'll understand why one of them never walked out again. In the suffocating summers of 1830s Louisiana, Magnolia Point Plantation rose from the swamplands like a monument built from vanity itself. The house was enormous, white pillars, sprawling porches, and windows so tall they seemed meant for watching, judging. The Beaumont family had owned the land for generations, but the wealth that once dazzled New Orleans society was beginning to crumble under debt, drought, and decaying reputation. At the center of this sinking empire was Eleanor Beaumont, a woman whose beauty had always been her greatest defense. Her dark hair, meticulously styled, never dared stray from its perfect shape, even in the swampy air. She maintained an elegant composure, one that suggested she could outstare the sun itself. But behind those calm, glassy eyes, a different truth simmered. Fear of losing control. Fear of fading. Fear of being forgotten. She walked the halls of Magnolia Point like a queen ruling over a kingdom built on shifting sand. Servants scurried out of her path. Guests whispered about her strictness, her pride, her unyielding need to appear perfect. Yet beneath her calculated grace, Eleanor felt the walls closing in. She knew the plantation was failing. She knew her beauty was aging. She knew her daughter's return would threaten the fragile balance she had clung to. Her daughter, Celeste Beaumont, returned home after 2 years in New Orleans, and to Eleanor, it felt like the past had marched into her home uninvited. Celeste was 18 now, no longer the quiet, uncertain girl Eleanor had sent away for schooling. She walked with confidence, spoke with sharp curiosity, and carried a spark in her eyes that Eleanor both admired and resented. Where Eleanor cultivated cold perfection, Celeste embodied life, warmth, boldness, and the fearless honesty that cut straight to the truth. The moment Celeste stepped into Magnolia Point, dust motes drifted through the streaks of sunlight like memories stirring awake. "Home," Celeste whispered. "Your home," Eleanor corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "so long as you remember its rules." But Celeste had changed too much to fit quietly back into her mother's world. The first sign of tension arrived on Celeste's second day, when she met Isaac. Isaac was an enslaved man, tall, soft-spoken, with a composed strength that seemed out of place in a world built on cruelty. He carried himself differently, thoughtfully, deliberately, as though he saw the world from a vantage point others never bothered to consider. He was known for his intelligence, his fluency in French, and his uncanny ability to fix anything placed in his hands. Celeste first encountered him repairing a broken window latch in the hallway. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice gentle. He hesitated. "Good morning, Miss Celeste." "You don't have to call me that," she replied. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. Caution, perhaps. "I'm afraid I do." And just like that, she understood. The world she had studied in books was not the world she lived in. What Celeste didn't know was that Isaac already played an unspoken role in her mother's private life, a role rooted in power, secrecy, and blurred boundaries Eleanor would never acknowledge aloud. Eleanor had convinced herself that Isaac's presence soothed her loneliness, that his calmness justified the attention she gave him. She disguised her dependency behind orders, behind tasks, behind moments that looked harmless from a distance. She told herself it was harmless. But Celeste, young, observant, and idealistic, noticed the subtle exchanges, the glances, the tension beneath the surface, and Isaac noticed her noticing. 3 people, 1 house, too many secrets. Magnolia Point Plantation, already cracking at its foundation, had just been given the final pressure it needed to collapse. And none of them knew that the collapse would begin with a disappearance. If you're hooked already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, whose side are you on so far? Eleanor's, Celeste's, or Isaac's? Before we dive in, imagine two women under the same roof, both drawn to the same man, yet neither knowing the other's secret. Imagine the tension building quietly, silently, like a storm you can feel long before you see it. That storm is about to break over Magnolia Point, because in this, hearts collide, loyalties blur, and danger steps silently into the room. The early mornings at Magnolia Point always began the same way. The sun rising behind thick moss-draped oaks, the air warm enough to cling to your skin, and the distant hum of workers beginning their daily labor. But for Eleanor Beaumont, the day didn't begin until she saw Isaac. It had become part of her routine, something she pretended not to notice. She always found a reason to walk past the gardens when she knew he would be there, fixing tools, carrying crates, checking fences. And every time she saw him, a rush of conflicting emotions washed through her. Eleanor had lived her entire life believing she deserved admiration. Men in New Orleans had once competed for her attention. She was the belle of every ballroom, desirable, envied, irreplaceable. But time had thinned that aura. In Isaac, she found something intoxicating. Not flirtation, not infatuation, but attention without pretense. He looked at her not as a symbol, not as a trophy, but as a person. And that, she told herself, was harmless. Just a little harmless admiration. But the truth was never that simple. One evening, as she supervised the household accounts, she caught sight of Isaac through the parlor window. He paused, noticing she was watching him, and nodded respectfully before continuing his work. Her breath hitched just slightly. A harmless glance, a harmless moment, a dangerous lie. Meanwhile, Celeste, still adjusting to life back at Magnolia Point, sought refuge in the far corner of the garden where she could sketch in peace. One afternoon, she saw Isaac walking by carrying a bundle of river reeds. "Are those for basket weaving?" she asked. Isaac stopped, surprised she recognized the material. "Yes, Miss Celeste, for the storage room." Celeste smiled, setting aside her sketchbook. "I used to watch the women weave when I was younger. They made patterns from memory." Isaac nodded slowly. "Most patterns tell a story." "I like stories," she said, tilting her head. "What story are these reeds supposed to tell?" Isaac hesitated. No one ever asked him questions that weren't orders. "It depends who's weaving," he answered. "Every hand tells a different truth." Celeste stared at him, absorbing the quiet wisdom in his words. This was no ordinary worker. There was depth here, a mind shaped by silence and survival. As the days passed, she found herself seeking him out, not intentionally at first, just casual interactions. But soon those casual moments lasted longer, filled with conversation about books, nature, and the world beyond Magnolia Point. She felt drawn to him, drawn in a way she didn't fully understand. But neither she nor Isaac knew that Eleanor watched everything, and she noticed the shift. One evening, as Eleanor dressed for dinner, she caught Celeste in the hallway. "You've been spending a great deal of time outdoors," Eleanor remarked, adjusting her pearl necklace. "I like the gardens," she replied plainly. "And who do you find there?" Eleanor asked, her voice deceptively light. Celeste froze for just a fraction of a second. "I find peace there, that's all." Eleanor smiled, but there was warning behind her lips. "Be careful where you look for peace, my dear. Some places hold thorns." Celeste felt her stomach twist. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Was her mother suspicious, jealous, controlling? Or afraid? Isaac felt the tension tightening around him like a rope. Eleanor's glances, Celeste's questions. The way the household seemed to hum with unspoken rumors. He didn't want trouble. Trouble was deadly for a man in his position. Yet, every day, the lines blurred more. Eleanor's gaze lingered. Celeste's presence warmed. And Isaac stood between two worlds. One of power, one of possibility. Unable to choose either because choice was a luxury he didn't have. He sensed something dangerous brewing. Something he would be blamed for no matter what. Because in Magnolia Point, secrets didn't stay secret for long. And soon the two women would realize that they were not alone in their desire. They had each become competitors in a game neither should have played. If you're ready for the story to get even more intense, hit like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss. And drop a comment. Who do you think is falling faster? Eleanor or Celeste? Before it begins, let me warn you, this is where everything changes. Secrets don't just stay hidden, they rot, they spill. And in Magnolia Point Plantation, one overheard conversation would turn a quiet tension into a full-blown war. If you thought jealousy was dangerous, wait until you see what pride looks like. Days at Magnolia Point move like slow molasses. Thick, sticky, heavy, but beneath the stillness, the air vibrated with something darker, suspicion. Eleanor sensed Celeste watching Isaac. Celeste sensed Eleanor guarding him. And Isaac, he sensed both women walking toward disaster, one step at a time. The plantation workers whispered that the Beaumont women had become restless, irritable, unpredictable. Eleanor snapped at the staff for the smallest mistakes. Celeste wandered the grounds like she was searching for something she'd lost. And Isaac tried to stay invisible. But invisibility was impossible when two pairs of eyes kept looking for him. It all came to a head on a humid evening when thunderheads gathered on the horizon. Celeste had spent the afternoon sketching near the west parlor. She left to fetch more paper, forgetting to close the small side door behind her. It didn't latch properly, leaving a narrow opening to the room. As she returned, she heard voices, hushed, close, too intimate to be casual. She froze. Inside, through the crack of the door, she saw her mother and Isaac. Eleanor stood closer to him than she had any right to be, her tone soft, almost pleading, nothing like the commanding woman she was with everyone else. "You don't have to avoid me, Mr. Mercier," Eleanor said quietly. "I've noticed you pulling away." Isaac kept his head slightly bowed, but his voice was steady. "I don't want to cause trouble, ma'am." "You won't." Eleanor stepped closer. "I trust you." Celeste felt something inside her chest twist violently. Her mother's expression, gentle, vulnerable, was one Celeste had never seen before. It wasn't motherly. It wasn't authoritative. It was yearning. Isaac shifted uneasily. "Miss Eleanor, I can't speak to you like this. Not alone. You can. And you will. I decide the rules of this house." Celeste's breath caught. She had known her mother was controlling, but this was different. This was personal, intimate, dangerous. Before Eleanor could say more, Isaac stepped back. "I mean, no disrespect, but this isn't safe." "Safe?" Eleanor's voice cracked just slightly. "Nothing in this house is safe unless I make it so." The moment the words left her mother's mouth, Celeste backed away silently, heart pounding. She didn't wait to hear more. She didn't need to. The truth was clear enough to burn. She felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. She had admired Isaac, trusted him, maybe even something more. And her own mother had been standing in the shadows of those same feelings. That night, Celeste didn't sleep. She paced her room, replaying every interaction, every smile, every conversation, every warning her mother had spoken with that cold, knowing edge. By morning, she couldn't hold it in. She found Isaac in the storage shed repairing a broken wheel spoke. "What is she to you?" Celeste demanded, voice trembling. Isaac froze. "Miss Celeste, don't call me that right now. Just answer me." Her eyes glistened, not with anger, but with heartbreak. Isaac put the tool down slowly. "Your mother is someone I must be careful around." "Careful?" Celeste repeated, her voice cutting. "I saw you two." He swallowed hard, but didn't look away. "Your mother has power over every part of my life." "And I don't?" Celeste whispered. "No," he said. "You're different." The truth, spoken softly, hurt more than a lie. Celeste stared at him, this man she had begun to care for, trapped between fear and survival. She realized suddenly that this wasn't a love triangle. It was something far more tragic. Isaac wasn't choosing. He couldn't choose, because choice was a privilege he never had. Later that evening, Celeste confronted Eleanor in the sitting room. "I know about you and Isaac," she said without preamble. Her teacup stilled mid-air. "Excuse me?" "I saw you." Celeste's voice shook. "I heard everything." A long silence stretched between them, sharp, cold, dangerous. Finally, Eleanor set the cup down with exquisite calm. "Be careful, Celeste. You are playing a game without understanding the rules." "And you," she replied, "are crossing lines no mother should cross." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family." Celeste stepped closer. "And you have no idea what you've just started." The fracture between them was no longer a crack. It was an open wound. And Magnolia Point was beginning to bleed. If this hit hard, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the disappearance you've been waiting for. It's getting closer. And tell me in the comments, whose side are you taking now? Eleanor? Celeste? Or Isaac?
Someone is about to vanish. Not quietly, not cleanly. When jealousy turns into desperation and pride turns into panic, Magnolia Point becomes more than just a plantation. It becomes a trap. If you've been waiting for the moment everything snaps, this is it. The storm rolled in slowly. Dark clouds gathered above Magnolia Point like a hand closing into a fist. The air grew heavier, thick with the smell of rain and something else. Tension, sharp and metallic, like the taste of fear at the back of the tongue. Inside the house, the atmosphere was worse. Since the confrontation in the sitting room, Eleanor and Celeste no longer pretended. There were no gentle smiles, no forced pleasantries, no attempts to smooth over the truth. Their conversations were shorter, their gazes colder, their silences longer. Servants avoided being alone in a room with either of them. Everyone felt it. The house was divided, and the fault line ran straight through the hearts of the two Beaumont women. And at the center of it all, caught in the crossfire, was Isaac. He kept his head down, his movements efficient but cautious. He spoke only when spoken to, answered only what was asked, and never lingered where eyes might catch him. But no amount of carefulness could erase the fact that both Eleanor and Celeste had become dangerously attached to him. That attachment, he knew, would not end peacefully. The evening it all changed began with distant thunder. Rain had not yet fallen, but the sky was a sickly gray, bruised and swollen. Candles were lit early, their flames flickering in the draft that slipped through old window frames. Celeste stood at her bedroom window, staring out at the restless horizon. Her heart felt just as restless. The memory of Isaac's words, "You're different," wouldn't leave her. Neither would the image of her mother standing too close to him in the parlor. She had thought of leaving before, of running away from Magnolia Point, from Eleanor's control, from the suffocating expectations of a world she no longer believed in. But now, her thoughts had sharpened into something specific. She didn't just want to escape, she wanted to expose what lurked beneath her family's polished image. And Isaac, she couldn't leave him behind. Downstairs, Eleanor was seated in her private study, a glass of brandy untouched beside her. She stared at ledgers and bills, but the numbers blurred. Celeste's accusations echoed in her head. You are crossing lines no mother should cross. You have no idea what you've just started. For the first time, Eleanor felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: panic. Her power had always come from control of her image, her household, her secrets. But now, her daughter threatened all of it. Celeste was impulsive, idealistic, and worst of all, honest. If she spoke carelessly in town, if she told someone what she'd seen, if she used the truth as a weapon, Eleanor's carefully curated world would fall apart. And Isaac, he was the proof, the living, breathing reminder of Eleanor's weakness. She could not afford weakness. Later that night, when the sky finally tore open and rain began to crash against the roof, everything came to a head. Celeste went to find Eleanor, determined to force a decision. She found her mother in the upstairs hallway, standing near one of the tall windows, watching lightning flash in the distance. "We need to talk," Celeste said, her voice steady despite the storm. Eleanor didn't turn. "There is nothing left to say." "There's everything left to say," Celeste argued. "About Isaac, about this house, about what you've done." Eleanor finally turned to face her, eyes cold but glistening. "I have done what I must to survive. You think the world will spare us because you feel righteous? You are still a child." "I am not a child," Celeste shot back, "and I won't let you use him. Not like that. Not anymore." Thunder rumbled, shaking the windows. Celeste stepped closer, voice lowering with urgency. "I'm leaving, Mother, and when I go, I'm not going quietly. I'll tell what I've seen. I'll tell what you've done." The words landed between them like a dropped match. Eleanor's face went pale, then hardened into something frighteningly calm. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." For a long moment, neither moved. The storm screamed outside. Inside, two lives stood on the edge of a decision that couldn't be taken back. Finally, Eleanor spoke in a flat, almost empty tone. "If you walk out of this house with that kind of threat, Celeste, you won't just destroy me. You'll destroy everyone here, including him." Her hand trembled at her side. Maybe the truth needs to destroy something. Eleanor stared at her daughter, her reflection, her rival, her reminder of everything she feared losing. She realized in that instant that Celeste was no longer someone she could control, only someone she could stop. Hours later, as the storm reached its peak, Celeste's room door stood open. Her trunk was half packed, clothes scattered, a drawer left pulled out as if she had been interrupted mid-motion. By morning, Celeste was gone. Footprints in the mud led away from the house, toward the marsh at the edge of the property, and then disappeared, swallowed by the storm-soaked earth. Eleanor told everyone her daughter had run off in a fit of emotion. But Isaac, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair, staring at those fading footprints, felt something deep in his bones. This was no simple runaway. Something happened in the storm, and whatever it was, Magnolia Point would never be the same again. If that ending gave you chills, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss where Isaac starts digging for the truth. And tell me in the comments, do you think Celeste ran away, or did something far darker happen that night? Before we begin, remember this. Every disappearance leaves two stories behind, the one people tell and the one that actually happened. Isaac stops being a background figure and becomes the only person brave enough to search for the truth. But in Magnolia Point, digging for answers is the same as digging a grave. Let's begin. Rain had washed away the footprints, but not the dread. For 2 days after Celeste's disappearance, Magnolia Point moved like a house under a curse. No one spoke above a whisper. No one slept properly. The workers exchanged tense glances, quietly wondering if something unspeakable had happened during the storm. Eleanor Beaumont, however, insisted on a single narrative. Celeste ran away. She'll come back when she realizes her mistake. She repeated it so often that even she began to sound like she needed convincing. But Isaac didn't believe it, not for a moment. He had seen Celeste the day before the storm. Her eyes filled with resolve. She had plans. She had fear. She had a fire inside her that could not be extinguished by drama or impulsive emotion. Celeste was not the type to vanish without a trace, unless someone or something forced her to. On the third morning, Isaac approached Eleanor with quiet politeness. "Ma'am, shouldn't we send someone into town or the marsh just to be sure she didn't get lost?" Eleanor's spoon paused mid-stir in her tea. "She is not lost. She is stubborn. She'll return once she's done proving a point." Isaac didn't flinch. "Storms can be dangerous." Eleanor set her spoon down with a hard clink. "I said no." Her eyes were cold, too cold, as though fear was hiding behind the frost. Isaac bowed slightly, but inside, his suspicions only grew. If Eleanor truly believed her daughter was alive, she would have searched. If she didn't, then she had something to hide. That night, Isaac went to the workers' quarters. He quietly asked around, careful not to draw attention. Old Martha, who had been on the plantation longer than anyone, pulled him aside. "People saw lantern light in the garden that night," she whispered. "Late, too late." "Who?" Isaac asked. Martha's lips tightened. A woman's shape, moving fast, then a scream. But the storm swallowed it. A chill slid down Isaac's spine. "Why didn't anyone speak up?" he asked. "Because speaking up gets you disappeared too." He understood. Fear ruled Magnolia Point even more than Eleanor. The next day, Isaac ventured toward the marsh himself, alone. The mud still held some impressions from the storm, faint and warped, but something stood out. A series of drag marks leading toward the old well house, a dilapidated structure Eleanor rarely allowed anyone to approach. Isaac's breath caught. Celeste's footprints had led toward the marsh, but these marks suggested someone, or something, had been pulled in a different direction entirely. He approached the well house slowly, heart pounding. The wooden door was warped, the hinges rusted. When he pushed it, it groaned like something alive. Inside he found a lantern, extinguished but recently used. The wick smelled faintly of oil. A shawl lay on the floor. Celeste's? Possibly. The fabric was familiar. Isaac knelt and picked it up. A memory flashed. Celeste laughing beneath a magnolia tree, that same shawl draped around her shoulders. His jaw tightened. Something terrible had happened here. Something Eleanor didn't want found. That evening, he confronted Eleanor. Not directly, but through implication. "I went near the old well house today," he said quietly while serving her dinner. Eleanor's fork froze. "That place is unsafe. You know the boards are rotten." "Yes," Isaac said, watching her carefully. "But someone was there recently. Someone during the storm." Eleanor's face drained of color before she regained her composure. "You are overstepping, Isaac." "Maybe, but Celeste deserves someone to look for her." For a moment, something almost human flickered across Eleanor's expression, something like pain or guilt or fear. Then it vanished. "You will not go near that well again. Do you understand me?" She understood perfectly. She was afraid.
and fear meant she knew something he didn't. That night, Isaac made his decision. He would no longer stay silent, no longer remain trapped in the middle of a battle he never chose. Celeste had trusted him, confided in him, believed in him. He owed her the truth, even if it cost him everything. Under cover of darkness, he packed a small satchel, slipped out of the quarters, and headed toward the well house once more. He had to find answers. He had to find Celeste, or at least what was left of the truth. Behind him, in the shadows of the main house, a curtain shifted. Eleanor was watching, and she knew exactly where he was going.
If you're ready for everything to be revealed, hit like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the final truth behind Celeste's disappearance. And drop a comment. Do you think Isaac will survive uncovering the truth? Or is Magnolia Point already tightening its grip on him? The truth rises like something dragged up from deep water, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every secret, every lie, and every whispered threat finally reveals what happened to Celeste, and why Magnolia Point would never survive its own sins. The night Isaac returned to the old well house, the world felt unnaturally still. Even the crickets had gone silent. Even the wind refused to move. He approached with a lantern in hand, the flame trembling like a heartbeat. The ancient boards groaned beneath his weight, and every sound echoed through the hollow, damp air. He knew he didn't have much time. Eleanor had seen him leave, and Eleanor, when desperate, was unpredictable. But the truth demanded to be found. Inside, shadows stretched long and thin. The smell of wet earth clung to everything. Isaac lowered his lantern and searched, really searched. Beneath a rotting table, behind warped crates, around piles of half-forgotten tools. Then he noticed something odd. A set of boards near the well opening looked newer than the rest, freshly nailed down. The wood unweathered compared to everything else in the room. Isaac's breath hitched. Someone had tried to cover something. With steady hands, he pried the boards loose one by one. Each nail groaned like a warning. When the last board lifted, a wave of cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. The well yawned open, deeper than he remembered, its stone walls slick with moss. And at the bottom, something glimmered. Isaac lowered the lantern, inch by inch. Its light revealed fragments, cloth tangled on a stone, something metallic, something pale. His chest tightened painfully. Celeste's locket, her shoelace, her torn shawl. There was no body, only these terrible traces, washed and scattered by the storm water. But the meaning was unmistakable. Celeste hadn't run away. She hadn't fled in fear or anger. She had been silenced, and someone had tried to hide it. Isaac closed his eyes, grief crashing over him like a wave. He knew Celeste had been brave. She had confronted her mother, challenged the lies, refused to be quiet. And Magnolia Point, its pride, its power, its secrets, had devoured her. He whispered a promise into the cold darkness. I won't let her vanish, not like this. But someone else had already followed him into the well house. A floorboard creaked behind him. Isaac turned, lantern raised, just in time to see Eleanor Beaumont standing in the doorway. Rain dripping from her cloak, face pale and unreadable. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Isaac didn't move. You knew. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes shimmering in the lantern glow. Celeste brought it on herself. She was going to ruin everything. She was going to destroy the family. She was your daughter, Isaac said, voice cracking. She was a threat, Eleanor whispered, and threats must be contained. Isaac felt something inside him break, something that had stayed intact through years of injustice, cruelty, and survival.
He had never expected warmth from Eleanor, but he had not expected this. This brutal confession delivered with the calmness of a woman who believed she had no choice. "You can't bury this," Isaac said. "Someone will find out." "Only if you tell them," Eleanor's voice dropped. "And you won't." She reached for something inside her cloak. Isaac tensed. But before she could step forward, lightning cracked outside, illuminating the well house in a white flash, followed instantly by an explosion of thunder so loud it shook the foundation. The sound startled Eleanor. Her foot slipped on the wet boards. She stumbled. And before Isaac could reach her, she fell, backward, into the open well. Her scream echoed once, then vanished into the darkness below. The lantern flickered violently. Isaac rushed to the edge, but the well swallowed everything. Light, sound, the final member of the Beaumont bloodline. For a long moment he stood frozen, breathing hard, soaked in rain and shock. 2 lives gone, 1 house full of ghosts, 1 truth left standing. By sunrise, Isaac was gone. Some say he escaped north, helped by those who believed in him. Others say he disappeared into the marsh, taking the story and its proof with him. Magnolia Point's debts mounted, its walls cracked, its fields dried. Within a few years, the once magnificent plantation collapsed into ruin, reclaimed by vines and silence. But the locals kept telling the story. The mother, the daughter, the man trapped between them, and the night the storm swallowed them whole. Some legends warn of ghosts, but Magnolia Point warns of something worse. Secrets that demand silence, and the price paid by those who refuse it. If you want more stories like this, dark, dramatic, and unforgettable, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment which story you want next. Your support keeps the storytelling alive.